Hey YouTube, thank you for coming to my channel. Today we are talking about tarot cards more in depth. So inside of a tarot card deck, you have 78 cards. You really have to learn the meanings of each card, and each card is your tool. So it's just like learning carpentry, for example. You gotta learn your tools before you can really do a good reading, and then once you become advanced, you learn not just the meanings, but you learn to use your intuition when you're dealing with the cards. So first we have to understand the different suits, and we have to understand the major arcana and the minor arcana. So each of these 78 cards has a different meaning, and they can be both positive or negative. And you have to use the different suit keys to really interpret them. Let the cosmic energies flow freely. What you're dealing with in essence is 156 separate symbols. They all have a distinct purpose, and then they also relate with the card that is next to it as well. So a reverse card would be a negative meaning, and then upright card would be a positive meaning. I decided just to only do the upright. There are some cards that are a little bit more inherently good or bad, even in the upright position. So it's enough for me to just only do the upright, and so I don't do reversed at all, but that's up to you what you want to do. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these cards and I'm going to separate them out. So I'm going to put all my cups in one pile, all my wands in one pile, my swords in one pile, and then I'm going to put my major arcana in another pile, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to go through all of these and teach you guys what these mean. And then so you've got your numbers, for example, like an 8 of swords, and then you've got your minor arcana, so that would be like the Knight of Swords. So I'm going to separate those out. So all of basically like my royalty, I'll separate that, and then all of my numbers, and then the major arcana, so like Temperance, for example, I'm going to separate that out. And then we will be able to go through what they all mean. The Hermetic deck is very cool because it only has black and white pictures, but it does give you some words that go along with it as well. And so I do find that very helpful. You can almost just look at the pictures of these and you can see how you would want to interpret them. 6 of Swords, it says the Lord of Earned Success. So you can see that that is a very positive one. Like, you have earned your success. Now you get to reap what you've sowed. You get to see the fruit of all of your hard work. Whereas a 5 of Swords, it says Lord of Defeat. So you don't need to use reversed cards because these cards are so positive and negative in themselves. If you want to go get a deck of playing cards, you can do the same thing as well. So the wands are going to correspond to clubs. Cups are going to correspond to hearts. These swords are going to correspond to spades, and pentacles are going to correspond with diamonds. Each one of these suits is going to have a different meaning and correspond to a certain thing. Cups would correspond with water because water puts us in our, like, emotions are watery. So cups, water, emotions. A lot of times this is going to talk about your relationships. And then your wands, the element of fire. Swords is the element of air. Pentacles is the element of earth. The other things that they correspond to are wands correspond to enterprise and distinction. Cups corresponds to love and happiness. Swords corresponds to struggle and animosity. Pentacles correspond to money interests. The beginning card in each suit is going to be the Ace. The Ace corresponds to the beginning. So the Ace of Pentacles, for example. And we're looking at, it says the Lord of the root of the powers of the earth. If you draw the Ace, you're planting the seed of something. It can be good or bad. For example, if you get an Ace of Wands, it's the beginning of an enterprise or distinction. The Ace of Wands in the Hermetic Tarot deck, it says the Lord of the root of the power of fire. 1 is the beginning. 1 is the vibratory number of the creativity and individuality. 1 is alpha. From it, all the other numbers evolve. 1 is the beginning. 1 is the spirit. 1 is the father. 1 is individuality. And so an Ace of Wands is the beginning of enterprise and distinction. The Ace of Cups is the beginning of love and happiness. The Ace of Swords is the beginning of struggle and animosity. The Ace of Pentacles is the beginning of money interests. The court cards are the Queen, the Princess, the Knight, the King, all of those court people in our different suits. So we talked about the meaning of each of the suits already. And so let's get into the meaning of the court cards. Basically, we have 16 different personalities in our court cards. These court cards represent human beings primarily. Each family of court cards consists of 4 members. You have a king, a queen, a knight, and a page. Or if you're using a different deck, you have a queen, a princess, a knight, and a king. The Art Nouveau deck has a knave of chalices. It has a knight of chalices, a king of chalices, and a queen of chalices. Whereas the Hermetic deck, it has a King of Cups, Queen of Cups, Princess of Cups, and a Knight of Cups. They all have 4 in their family, so they all would correspond equally. It depends on what deck you're working with. Our court cards, these are royal families basically, and these will correspond to an individual person that's coming up in the readings. Like humans, each one of these families are divided into 2 main types, fair and dark. The wands and the cups correspond to fair hair and skin, whereas the swords and the pentacles will correspond to people who have dark hair and skin. So whether you've got a queen or a king, if it is in wands, we're looking at fair hair or red hair, blue eyes, fair skin. Cups, it is light to medium brown hair, hazel eyes, and medium skin. Whereas swords are going to point to someone with dark brown to black hair, dark eyes, and olive skin. The pentacles will point to someone with white hair or any color of eyes and fair skin, and it can also represent members of the dark-skinned races. A king would represent a mature man, a queen represents a mature woman, a knight represents a young man, and a page represents either a young boy or a young girl, depending on what deck you have. If you get a King of Wands represents a man that's usually married with a family. He can be secure in his business ventures, and he is perhaps a professional man. His temperament is apt to be hasty at times. If you get a Queen of Wands, it's a woman that is usually married and with a family. She loves her domestic environment and enjoys motherhood. She has an attractive personality which draws people to her. If you get a Knight of Wands, it is a young man who is apt to be impetuous. He can be found in any walk of life. Sometimes he makes sudden decisions and acts quickly once he decides. If you get a page or a princess card, for example, or a knave, then what you have is a boy or a girl, a child of either, is always associated with messages, news, information, and the source of the information is usually a close friend or a relative. So that is the Wands family. Now let's go on to the family of Cups. So, family of Cups. A King of Cups. A King of Cups. If you get a King of Cups, this man is usually a reliable type, possibly associated with law or divinity. He can be a bachelor and may be interested in the arts and sciences. He does not object to taking on extra responsibilities. The Queen of Cups. This woman is usually a good wife and mother. She's quite intuitive and sensitive. She can always look on the bright side, and she has plans for the future. The Knight of Cups. This young man is intelligent and can be a romantic. He has many talents and tends to be artistic. He often brings new ideas, invitations, and proposals. The Page of Cups is always associated with messages, news, and information. Like the Page of Wands, this person has a quiet and gentle personality. So for swords, if you get a King of Swords, this man is usually a man of authority, either civilian or attached to the military. His self-image is secure, and he could also be dealing with the government, or he could be a lawyer. He is level-headed and gives good advice. The Queen of Swords. This woman is usually endowed with a strong character and displays a good wit. Her appearance and mannerisms suggest she has money. She could be a widow or a woman without children. The Knight of Swords. This young man is always helpful and will give strength to others. He can be a bit too domineering, but he always means well. He's very helpful and can be depended upon. And the Page or the Princess of Swords. It's a boy or girl, and they are always associated with messages, news, and information. And they are bright and energetic. So the last one we've got here is we've got Pentacles. So let's go over the family of Pentacles. The King of Pentacles. The King of Pentacles is usually at the top in his industry. He may be associated with mathematics in some way. He's often married with children, and he's living a secure life. the Queen of Pentacles. This woman is usually efficient, generally very capable at anything she attempts. She can be both mother and business executive. She uses her talents in many ways and she can be very creative. However, she tends to be moody and she can have melancholy and she can get sentimental. The Knight of Pentacles. So this is going to be a young man and he is serious and methodical. He is very trustworthy, but he can also be very unimaginative. He's patient and forbearing, and he loves animals and nature. In the Hermetic deck, it says Lord of the Wild and Fertile Land. And then the Princess card or Page card of Pentacles. So this person, once again, is going to be associated with messages, news, and information. Just like all the other three families, this person respects others and appreciates the value of study and learning. If you get 3 kings, it can indicate some public recognition, honor, publicity, or celebration. If you get 3 queens, it could indicate a meeting, a gathering, or a public function for women. Basically, the use of the court cards in divination is that these court cards are going to represent people and situations involving people. Be sure that you are thoroughly understanding the court cards and you understand the different suit keys for each card so that you can have like the depth and the fluidity when you do these readings to really get a vision. So those are the court cards. Thanks for watching this video. I hope that this was helpful. Today we are talking about the major arcana. So inside of every tarot deck, you have the major arcana. And the major arcana is going to be separate from the minor arcana. And the major arcana is going to be symbolic of the different states and conditions of a man's spiritual life. Just as the minor arcana refers to a man's body and his mundane experiences, the major arcana deal with the immortal soul and its journey through eternity. So these cards are pretty deep. If you get a lot of major arcana cards in a reading, you may want to even do the reading again to get more clarification because these cards have a very deep meaning. So I want for you to take your deck and extract the 22 major arcana cards so you can go through them and put them into numerical order so you can follow along with me. So first you have, it'll say a 0 and it'll be the Fool or the foolish man. The Magician is number 1, and then 2 you have the High Priestess, 3 the Empress, 4 the Emperor, 5 the Hierophant, or Hierophant, however you say that. And then 6 is the Lovers, 7 is the Chariot, 8 is either Fortitude or Strength, depending on what deck you're looking at. 9 is the Hermit, 10 is the Great Wheel of Fortune, 11 is Justice, 12 is the Hanged Man, 13 is Death, or 13 could be called Transition depending on the deck you're using. 14 is Temperance, and 15 is going to either say Materialism or it might say the Devil. No wonder the Christians thought these cards were so evil, because there's a card that literally says the Devil in the Hermetic deck, but in another deck, it'll say Materialism. And then the next card, 16, is called the Tower, or it may say the Blasted Tower. And then after the tower, you have number 17, which is the star. And then you have 18, which is the moon. 19 is the sun. 20 is judgment, or the last judgment. And 21 is the world, or the universe. And since you started with 0, that's why you have 22. Okay, so this is the way that it would represent the spiritual journey. So we began our journey with a pure, untouched soul, and it's not yet of this world. All the wisdom and the knowledge containing the total essences of God are contained in the innocence of a newborn baby. And it's physically present in the world now, yet still enveloped in the higher consciousness. And then you go to the first card, which is the Magician. And before man are the tools of higher consciousness. As he becomes involved in the material plane, he is given all he needs to achieve success here on the earth. As he develops his ego, he must endeavor to retain his spiritual equilibrium and use his God-given tools to reach his heavenly goal. And then we have the High Priestess. On the earth plane, there are both negative and positive forces, material and spiritual values. Within the High Priestess, man can learn to face all that may oppose him in realizing his eternal balance of energies. He must learn to balance his emotions and desires and to direct his thoughts to his higher consciousness. The Empress. Man's blessings are plentiful, God's gifts are abundant. Man must endeavor to acknowledge and give thanks to the source of his rich inheritance. The reward of earthly labor is achieved in heaven. Man must learn that his status in this world is only temporary, and by the way he conducts his life here, it's measured by the eternal growth of his soul. The Emperor. As man obeys the laws of God, he must also recognize these laws in his fellow man. He who has chosen humility in this life must not envy others. Man must learn to respect leadership and authority, and raising his thoughts to the supreme force, he must learn to act in a kingly manner, just as an earthly ruler must acknowledge a higher authority. The Hierophant. The Church of God on earth must prosper, and man must contribute his efforts toward his goal. He must defend openly what he believes and oppose that which offends his conscience. And then we have the Lovers. As the soul progresses on earth, it is presented with many choices. Man is held responsible for the choices he makes. If difficulty arises, he must listen to his inner voice, which will direct him to higher guidance. His destiny lies before him. As he reaches maturity of the mind and body, he must understand that whatever he sows, he will reap. The Chariot. Another lesson to be learned is that of control. Man must adapt himself to the laws of men as well as to those of God. He must learn to be in command of his emotions and not allow them to rule his life. He must understand that he is a soul with a body, not a body with a soul. Strength. True strength is spiritual, not physical, and man must learn to use his strength of spirit to sustain himself in times of trouble, to lift himself above worldly turmoil. Man must realize that he is never alone with his doubts and fears, and that heavenly comfort can be his if he will only reach up for it. The Hermit. As man progresses spiritually, he realizes that God never turns away from him. He is never alone, and his most secret deeds and thoughts cannot be hidden. Therefore, it is important for him to examine his motives carefully. In times of loneliness and despair, when all seems dark, he need only raise his vision to see the Christ light pointing the way. The Wheel of Fortune. Life is like the wheel. When man is up, the only way to go is down. When he is down, he can be sure that he will eventually go up again. Nothing in this life is stable and permanent. Man must learn to accept the challenges and the blessings, for both are important to his soul's growth. Justice. The justice card means that justice is the voice of man's consciousness. He must learn to obey it. In order to maintain his inner balance, the higher consciousness of man directs his actions, and if it's ignored, man loses his spiritual equilibrium. This causes chaos in his life and harm to himself and his loved ones. The Hanged Man, which is number 12. The Hanged Man means in order to progress spiritually, man must curtail his pursuit of material gain. As he develops maturity, he should take time to reflect on his past life and submit his future to God. It is difficult to change direction when a man has devoted too much of his life to materiality, but it is at this point that he should have the courage to surrender his material needs to the higher consciousness and redirect his steps to God. Transition, number 13. Man has made death another word for fear. But death is not the end. It is the transition from one plane of existence to another. Existence on the journey back to God. If man will allow his ego to die on the earthly plane and experience the transformation of his higher self, then he will lose his fear of bodily death and come to accept it as a natural part of his progression. Number 14, temperance. When man is freely able to allow his higher consciousness to flow freely into the consciousness of his thoughts, he will experience the beauty and the order and the harmony of life. He will learn to be moderate in all things in order to maintain tranquility. The will of God becomes his own will, and he sees the glory of God in every living thing. Number 15, materialism. During the soul's journey, man must learn to use his powers correctly. He can choose to use them for material gain or in a manner which will increase his spiritual awareness. Temptation will be presented in many forms, but the powerful appeal of evil may always be overcome by reaching out to the higher consciousness. So the Tower means often man finds the need to change his ways, but he lacks the strength of will to achieve his spiritual goals. He may wish to break down his ego and materialistic pursuits, but he'll be prevented from doing so by fear. To find peace and contentment, it is sometimes necessary for man to experience loss and tragedy before he can find spiritual comfort and strength. Number 17 is the Star. In times of darkest depression, the star radiates the guidance of our higher consciousness. Man can overcome all fear if he will follow his light. It's the source of all inner strength, and it will lead him through the night into the beautiful dawn of supreme understanding. Next, we have number 18, the Moon. The moon means of all experiences a man must encounter on the earthly plane, the final test is faith. When he has passed beyond dependence upon reason and resolves to submit his being to the will of God, then he will truly understand the sustaining power of faith. Number 19 is the Sun. After the soul has undergone the trials of faith, the bonds that tie it to the earthly plane are severed, and then man can know true liberation and attainment. The knowledge of the true nature of his being and the part he is playing in the universal plan brings him the glorious reward of union with the God within himself. Number 20 is judgment. Man can now see the divine purpose through his own higher consciousness. He leaves behind all that once meant security to him and redirects his life and all his energy toward the glory of God. Life now has meaning for him, and man realizes why he is here. He looks at life with renewed hope. And then we have the world, which is number 21. So the world means The soul goes on, gathering experience after experience within God's universal plan. One experience gives birth to another throughout the eternal cycle of life and death. Existence is continuous, ever changing, but never ending. As the soul of man glimpses the continuousness of life and passing from one form to another, each life that the man lives is only a glimpse into eternity, a chance for him to refocus and refine his ideals towards God's will. Each time, fear and indecision must be overcome so that the soul can take one more step upward on its journey back to its eternal source, and in doing so realize that it is a part of God and an immortal manifestation of God's unlimited love. So that is our major arcana. These cards are very deep, and now you know all of the different meanings on the major arcana. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below. Thank you for watching.